Hello nerds, what are you doing? I'm sitting here on my floor with a stack of books, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for a wrap up. It's time for the May wrap up. June. I had a great reading month. How was your reading month? I read 10 books. I had 1 5-star, several 4-stars, and a DNF. That's a good reading month. Read a good mix of arcs, new releases, oldie but goodies. It was a good month. Before I get into any of that, I have an exciting thing. On one of my recent videos, a couple people commented and said something about a book club or read along, and June is my birthday month. As a little birthday celebration, I thought I would do this experiment in the month of June. So I picked out a book for the month of June. The book is gonna be Sleepless Nights by Elizabeth Hardwick. This has been sitting on my TBR for a million years. It's a really old book. You can tell because my pages are so yellow. It's a super cheap used copy, 1979. So it should be easy to find either in a used bookstore, Abe Books, or thrift books. The library should have it. Not a hot new release. I hope it's still in print. So here's the game plan for our June read along. I'm gonna read this book at some point in the month of June, and I want you to read it too. And then at the end of the month, I'll do a video. I will solicit questions and comments and thoughts, and hopefully some people get creative and send me voice memos or little videos that you record of yourself talking about this book. That could be fun. Come on. I'll splice them all together and we'll have like a fun group review situation that I can upload at the end of the month. Your homework, get a copy of Sleepless Nights by Elizabeth Hardwick. Read it. Send me messages with your thoughts, what you're still thinking about, what's rolling around in your brain, questions you have, what parts you're wondering what I thought about, any reactions at all to this book. Send them my way and I'm going to compile them at the end of June. This has been on my TBR forever. I'm excited to finally read it. I've heard so much about it, so I feel like we'll have a lot to discuss. Yeah, if you participate, you can think of it as your birthday present to me. June read along, let's do it. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the books of May. The first book I read this month was Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. This was my second Lispector. This was Clarice's first novel, published when she was so young. God, she is good. This book is written in stream of consciousness style, so it definitely requires a lot of patience and commitment from the reader, I found. I think ultimately the takeaway from this book is the amorality of the world. This is not a book that leaves you feeling optimistic about the world we live in, or the world that Joanna inhabits. This book follows our main character, Joanna. She sees herself as bad or evil, but as a reader, I didn't feel that way. I felt like she was a product of her environment, that the world was sort of evil. This book has lots of big questions that I think a lot of thinkers in their 20s might be thinking about, like, what is my role? What do I deserve? What role do I play on this earth? What role does free will play in my actions and decisions? Yeah, this was a goodie. I enjoyed this. The next book I read this month, it was a collection of short stories called Your Duck is My Duck by Deborah Eisenberg. I think 7 short stories that are pretty long as far as short stories go. Almost novella length each one. They're so good and weird and fun. Themes that run through all of these stories were questions of wealth and inherited wealth. Who deserves wealth and who does wealth belong to and why? Questions of sanity and what is sanity? Questions of language, and Eisenberg has a lot of fun with language throughout the book. And questions of memory, whether or not we can trust our memory in retelling our stories. The first story, the one in which the collection is titled, I think is by far the best. It follows an artist who meets a couple at a party who are exorbitantly wealthy, and they invite her to their private island to do her work. When she gets there, things are not going well. Her cabin mate, roommate, makes a satirical play about the whole destruction of the political system around them. Often these very wealthy characters are the butt of Eisenberg's jokes in a smart, pointed way. Like any short story collection, they're not all bangers. Some high points and low points in the collection, but I really enjoyed it. The next book I started this month was my DNF, only my second DNF of the year. It was Savage Tongues by Azarine Vandervliet Lumi. This was kindly sent to me by Hatchet. It tells the story of an Iranian American teenager going to Spain to meet with her father, and I really wanted to love it. That's a great premise to me, but the writing was just really, I didn't even get very far. Long lists of adjectives. I had interpreted her tone: austere, direct, unadorned. Clunky sentences. I just opened to a random page and it says, perhaps I should begin at the beginning. That is what we call a cliche. The next book I read was also an ARC. It was a NetGalley ARC I read on the old Kindle, With Teeth by Kristen Arnett. And I didn't love this book. It is about a gay couple, 2 women raising a boy. I liked that premise. I, as you might know, love a unconventional tale of motherhood. But I found that this book also was very heavily reliant on cliches and tropes. Our main character, mother, is overworked and stressed, and instead of talking about it with the other people in her life or dealing with it, she just drinks a lot of Chardonnay. The Chardonnay drinking mother trope is tired. The main character is a depressed woman, and I thought this would be a DWM, as CJ likes to call it, a depressed woman moving through the world book, but a DWM book to me, especially the successful ones, the ones I like to read, are ones where we have a woman who's depressed because of all the fucked up shit in the world that's beyond her control, all the forces that act against women in this world, and she is wrestling with her interiority about how to manage all of this stuff around her. This book has almost no interiority. We're not getting this woman's wrestling with these big thoughts. We just get her drinking Chardonnay and breaking shit, yelling at people and running away. We don't get her asking any big questions. Why is she in the position she's in? What role did she play in getting here? What does she want? I found that frustrating and boring. I understand if there are people who like this. I could see why this would be sort of like a fun read. It just didn't deliver for me. The next 2 books I read were Things We Lost to the Water by Nguyen and Long Division by Kiese Laymon. These are both ARCs kindly sent to me. Long Division was sent to me by Scribner, and Things We Lost to the Water was sent to me by Knopf. I enjoyed both of these. These were both Katrina books. So this was a story of a Vietnamese family who moved to New Orleans to escape communism, and this was a story of a boy and his lineage in Mississippi as people who lived through the trauma of Katrina. So this book culminated in Katrina, and this book had Katrina in its rearview mirror. If you're interested in these books, especially this book, I highly recommend you watch my vlog. This book is wild, weird, funky, and I did a vlog where I tried to talk about it and maybe failed. Or go into this book totally blind and then check that out. That could be fun. Also, guys, Kiese Laymon himself commented on the vlog where I discussed this book. A talking cat? Really, Kiese? Woo. And he was like, you're an idiot. You didn't even notice that the cat's name is another character's name backwards. Oh, I am an idiot. He didn't say it like that, but that's how I got it. He was nice about it. We all have a Google alert set up for our own names, right? I would. If I was writing and publishing books, I'd have that Google alert set up. All right, the next book I read this month was Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. This is an interesting, internal, slow anti-thriller. I'm gonna call this an anti-thriller. The premise is that there is a woman. She has married a man who was previously married and had 2 small children. His wife snapped, went crazy, unclear, and murdered one of those children. She's in prison. One of the children is dead, and the other one went missing when the murder happened. All of that action has already taken place when the book happens. There's no reveal. It's not about the plot action, which I like. It's about just the interior wrestling with these facts. I think this book also has a lot of things to say about why we make the decisions we make, the role of punishment, the role of rehabilitation, how we atone. This book also has questions about motherhood, and I first heard about this book, or I was inspired to check this book out because CJ mentioned it in her good plot, good writing video. And I would say, for me, it was fine plot and fine writing. For me, actually, the strongest piece about the writing and the strongest piece about the book is setting. The book obviously takes place in Idaho, and the descriptions of the cold, snowy Idaho mountaintops, being snowed in, remote location. For me, that was the strongest piece of the book, the setting. And then the next book I read was my 5-star book of the month, Mayor of Leipzig by Rachel Kushner. This was very generously sent to me by Karma, which is a really cool independent press and bookstore in Manhattan. This book is beautiful. This is like a cloth-bound little guy. It's tiny. It's basically a short story bound as a book. I loved it. It is so weird and funky. Let me see if I can explain this. It's about the art world. It's about who gets to decide what is art, who gets to decide what is worthy as art, how the milieu of artists gets to be formed. It does the coolest structure wherein there's a protagonist telling the story in first person. And occasionally she cuts in and says things like, Rachel Kushner, the author of this book, who's writing this story, doesn't even really know me. She thinks she knows me, but she doesn't. So we have this weird breaking of the fourth wall where there's a reference of writer as writer, separate from character. And it's this mirror image of the art and painter relationship as well as the art and subject relationship. Is a painting of a subject real? Is that a real representation of that subject? Is a book about a character a real representation of that person? I loved this. It is a tiny time commitment. I read it in like an hour sitting. I will probably pick this back up because I loved it so much, and it's a cheap thrill, very limited time commitment for a big payoff. The highlight of the reading month, if you can get your hands on a copy of this, do it. Officially a Rachel Kushner convert. After 2 humongous bestsellers that everyone in the world read and I resisted, I picked up this tiny little weird thing that nobody has heard of or read, and now I'm on board. What can I say? Next, I read Cassandra at the Wedding. This was sent to me by the wonderful Lindsay, and it was great. I loved it. It has stuck with me. I've thought a lot about it, which is for me the sign of a great book. This book takes place in the 60s. It follows the story of twins. Actually, Grace at GK Reads did a video recently about tropes that she loves. Anytime she sees a book about a cult, she gets excited or something like that, and one of them was the twin trope, and she talked about how much she loves this book. I loved this book too. Twins, Cassandra and Judith. The book opens with Cassandra traveling back to her family ranch in Bakersfield, California to attend Judith's sort of spur of the moment wedding. Cassandra is a student at Berkeley. She's clearly the brainy, eccentric twin. Judith is at Juilliard, and she is the musical, more mainstream twin. First, they lived together in California, and they had this special twin bond. They had decided they were going to move to Paris and live together forever. Judith decides that before they move to Europe, she's gonna move to New York and go to Juilliard. She's gone for 9 months. When she calls and says she's met the man she's gonna marry, and she wants Cassandra to come down and stand by her at the wedding. I don't think that 9 months is a coincidence. Clearly that has been the incubation period for Judith to be reborn as her own self. She is a singular being, and nothing destroys Cassandra more than seeing her sister become her own self. So we see a self-destructive, depressed Cassandra's a DWM for sure. She is smart. She uses language in incredibly clever and hilarious ways. She is doing all that interior tackling with her problems that we love to see. One thing I loved about this book is that it's broken up into 3 sections. The first section is narrated by Cassandra. Then there's a break in the middle that's narrated by Judith, and we go back to Cassandra. And the voice shifts so radically. That middle section is boring. Clearly it is supposed to be. Judith's voice is boring. Cassandra's voice is fun, funny, clever, and Judith just she basic. I loved that. I loved this complicated, interesting, dark, academic-minded, clever woman. So this was a wonderful read, and I highly recommend it, and more people should read this. I also love Lindsay because she's always picking out and recommending for me cool books from like the 60s. I love that about her. She reads old books. Old books are cool. Books are cool. Love books. The last two books that I read, I did a vlog about. It was Things I Don't Want to Know by Deborah Levy and Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. These were two autobiographical stories. This is a traditional memoir that tells the story of Deborah Levy in Majorca reflecting on her childhood and how, as she's on this trip in Majorca, she's trying to write Swimming Home, which is a book that I love and have a video review of. She is talking about her experience growing up in South Africa and how her father was a political prisoner, and then they moved to England in exile from South Africa as they were opposed to apartheid. Writing Swimming Home was her way of confronting the trauma that she didn't want to confront, that she didn't want to know about her childhood. Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi was also a story of dealing with or processing trauma through narrative. You've probably seen everyone in the world talk about this book. It is as incredibly ingenious as you think it is. It is a whole new form. It takes the life of Emezi and gives it to a fictional character named Ada, and has the story of that life narrated by the spirits who inhabit Ada's mind. I loved this book. I thought it was beautifully written. I had some qualms that I mentioned in the vlog, my most recent vlog. I felt there was some single dimensionality to Ada in regards to her relationship with men, and not enough about her relationship to her studies, to her environment, her relationship to family or friends, and I felt that the story lacked depth. For that reason, I'd be curious to hear if anyone else has read this and similar views. Check out my vlog for more thoughts about that. And before we go, as always, every month, I have 3 more recommendations for you. Today I have an article, a podcast, and a TV show. How well-rounded am I? First, I'm recommending an article in Harper's Bazaar. This story is called My Korean Mother and I Speak to the Dead, and it was written by my friend Alex. And I'm just recommending it because I want you to know how cool I am, that I have cool friends who do cool stuff. It's actually like an incredibly beautiful story that I loved so much. It is an autobiographical essay of Alex's experience as the daughter of a Korean woman and a white man, her spirituality that she has inherited from her mother, but also the questions and unknowing that she has in her relationship with her mother and her Korean family. It is beautiful. It also references Minor History, which is a book that I've read and discussed on this channel before in a vlog. And do we think Alex is gonna be super weirded out when she sees me talking about her on the interwebs? Hi, Alex. The next thing I want to recommend is a podcast episode with Rachel Cusk discussing Second Place. First of all, the podcast is Bookworm and it's on KCRW. If you've never listened to Bookworm, it is wild. The host name is Michael Silverblatt, and he talks like this. I'm Michael Silverblatt. My guest today, Rachel Cusk. It's a little distracting, so that's why I have to warn you. Before you dive into that, you need to be warned. So the theme song goes, where would we be without books? It's a rhetorical question. I appreciate a podcast that can laugh at itself. Anyway, I have read several reviews of Second Place and some interviews with Rachel Cusk, and all great. But this was doing something different. If you've read Second Place, you'll know that at the end, it explains that it is the retelling of a story that actually happened, in which famous patron of the arts invited D.H. Lawrence to her home in Taos, the same way that our protagonist and narrator of Second Place invites the painter L to her home. So this interview focuses almost entirely on the historical context and factual nature of the story, which is not the most interesting thing about the book to me. I think the book is phenomenal as on its own, but as an added layer of understanding, I thought that this podcast conversation about that was great. So if you've read Second Place and you feel like you've read every review and you've gotten all you can out of it, check out this even more Cusk to snack on. And as always, every book I'm mentioning and every recommendation linked downstairs. Lastly, I'm going to recommend Underground Railroad, the mini-series on Amazon Prime. Directed so beautifully by Barry Jenkins. Justin and I watched it over the past week or so. It is beautiful, heartbreaking, it is so well done. A beautiful adaptation of a book, the Colson Whitehead book, Underground Railroad. Every night we turned it off, Justin and I would just sort of exhale and have a conversation about what we just saw and witnessed. I'm grateful for those conversations that this miniseries brought into our house, so I recommend you check it out as well. So that is my May wrap up. Don't forget, as a birthday present to me, you should pick up a copy of Sleepless Nights and read it between now and June 30th so that we can discuss. Send me your thoughts, questions, comments, favorite quotes, hate mail, whatever you got, send it my way. Thank you so much for tuning into my May wrap up. Please comment below what was your favorite book that you read in the month of May. Bye, love you nerds.